Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Basel Pod. I'm Sam Basel, joined alongside Clubfoot Jim and Jordan Laube. And if you're watching live, welcome. If you're watching on the re-airing and or listening on Spotify, happy Friday. Today, we're going over our Super Bowl 59 preview. We're going to be breaking down all the important matchups you need to know, everything that you kind of need to expect for who's going to win, who's going to come out on top, who's going to have a great performance. We're also going to talk about just evaluating this NFL season in general. But first, I wanted to talk about a little outside football stuff, just because I've always felt like Super Bowl Media Week is obviously kind of the biggest pageant, so to say, in the American sporting calendar, right? Everyone, all the teams fly out the weekend before. They have this massive press row set up where every player is at their own individual press conference podium for days, and reporters are asking them questions. And I always feel like there's always big things that come out of it, right? It's whether it's like really valuable information in terms of strategy going into the Super Bowl, how the players are feeling to be in the game, from that to what kind of cereal they like, their favorite rom-coms, and that's always great. But I feel like this week specifically, Super Bowl Media Week, has really been overshadowed by a lot of massive headlines in other sports. Specifically talking about, one of the most significant NBA trade deadlines I've seen in years. Luka moving to the Lakers, Jimmy Butler to the Warriors. Maybe this is just for, New Yorkers specifically, but, Pete Alonso re-signing with the Mets after a long kind of arbitration period trying to figure out his contract. So for you guys, how do you feel like this Super Bowl Media Week's been for you so far? And have you really not been paying attention because there's just so much going on like elsewhere in the world of sports?
Yeah. The one thing from Super Bowl Media Week that really kind of snuck into this news cycle for me was Jameis Winston's interview with Saquon Barkley. He's just Jameis Winston is just incredible television, whether it be on the field, off the field, in supermarkets. He's just incredible. His banner with Saquon Barkley was really, really great. I honestly would keep an eye out for him signing with the Giants. I feel like that was a speak into existence kind of situation. But other than that, single interaction which really had nothing to do with the Super Bowl at all. I was playing with Call of Duty with a bunch of friends when the Luka news broke, and I said it. They all told me I was lying. I was kidding, that Shams got hacked, that I was bullshitting them. And we just kind of, sat in awe for a little while because that felt like a historical moment that we were all experiencing at the same time. I can't remember a trade that significant ever really in the NBA other than the trade that was blocked, the Chris Paul trade to the Lakers. Yep. So I just, I still don't really believe it's really happened. It's crazy.
Jordan, how about you?
A little similar to Clubfoot, our friend over there. I was playing 2K with my buddies at the strike of midnight when that notification hit my phone. And like everyone else, we were like, oh, it's got to be hacked, can't be real, especially for the compensation, right? Like the compensation back is the craziest part. And like, yeah, the Mavericks, arguably, do they need a body like AD? Probably not, but to have that third big rotation between Lively, Gafford, and now him, like that's just an insane rotation between all of them. But now the flip side of it is the Lakers are obviously gearing up to go see LeBron win a final title. They're setting up their team in the best way they can to make that happen. And just the gravity of the whole trade, right? Like obviously shook the sports world. And I'm sure we've seen, like you guys have all seen, like what would that be like in the NFL? Like what kind of trade would that be in the MLB? What kind of trade would that be? And I don't know what your guys' thoughts are, but mine is if you took modern day Justin Jefferson and you put him on the 2018 Patriots team and traded Gronk to the Vikings in today's like world. It's kind of what that feels like. Like the Vikings right now, they have TJ Hawkinson, Josh Oliver is a very good tight end too, but you want that other dominating big body, put Gronk on that team, kind of works out for them. And then you trade a top 5 player in the league right now to a historic franchise who's trying to win another recent title, throw him with one of the best players and one of the best veterans of all time and the GOAT of the sport. You know, some people still debate MJ versus LeBron. People will debate Brady versus Mahomes, obviously, but like the current GOAT of the sport, like I believe like that's such a great one-to-one comparison. Like I've seen Josh Allen for Chris Jones, which like makes sense because obviously that trade would happen because they're, you know, like modern day. But thinking of the gravity, it would be Jeddah's for Gronk on a Super Bowl Pats team, you know, in my opinion. So I thought that was interesting. The Pete Alonso deal, it's a 2-year, but a one with the club option, he gets $30 million or something. Like,
yeah, I think it's a 1-year disguised as a 2-year.
Yeah, exactly. Like
yeah.
if he does really what, they're probably going to extend it. If he does well enough on $30 million this year, I don't think it's going to end up being a 2-year. You know, it's either going to be it's either one and done, or he's getting a massive extension after this. You know,
it feels like a contract just made to delay, you know, and just buy more time for a potential longer extension talk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, finishing up on this, the Luka trade. I mean, aside from just the preposterousness of it, you know, as someone who's a Knicks fan and just not really affected by it, unless, you know, the Knicks should meet the Lakers in the finals if they make it that far. I think my favorite part about this trade is just how it's just left every single media member just completely off guard. Like I've read articles, listened to podcasts, watched TV segments about it, and for the first 3 days of it, no one knew how to make heads or tails of it. So that's kind of been this week, but we're finishing up the 2024 NFL season, and Jordan, all season long, you have been putting out weekly updates. They've been great. They've been super detailed about everything going on in the league. Biggest performers, biggest fantasy performances, updated power rankings, and I've edited pretty much every single one throughout the season. And I noticed a very interesting trend. It started off, it felt like, not that you were unhappy watching football, but it felt like you highlighted a noticeable drop in the quality of play. Not that it made football unwatchable, but just, you know, it just wasn't as, you know, great football that we've seen in the past couple of years. But then as we reached the midseason point, it kind of took a turn upwards. And then by the time the playoffs rolled around, I think you were kind of ready to be fully excited again with how much good football was being played. So I just was curious if you can kind of walk us through that. What kind of jumped out to you in the first couple of weeks that you were like, man, I'm just watching a lot of not great football here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a multitude of things, right? Like I think football, we consume it much differently now than we did even 5 years ago, right? Like red zone is insanely prevalent now, and it's almost the go-to way to watch football on Sundays for a lot of fans who are very into the sport, right? Because you want to see everything, especially the big moments, right? So it feels like when you go watch those standalone primetime games, you're losing that like action happening all the time. And so you're like, oh, nothing's happening. When really football itself, like it has changed, but it's kind of the same. But you're used to seeing the big shots and the big plays and the big runs on red zone, big interceptions, big sacks. And you go watch a standalone game and it's like, oh, there's a check down. Oh, there's another touchdown. Oh, it's an RPO. Like, and that's just where the NFL is today, right? It's very modernized. It's very influenced by the college game because that's what most of these teams are running. And that's usually what all these quarterbacks and receivers and running backs can run, and offensive line with new zone blocking styles, right? Like it's how the game's transformed, right? So the quality for me did dip a little bit because of that. But to your point, and I also think the league was very rookie dominant this year in a way we haven't seen in a long time, where a lot of rookies were playing to a level that we haven't seen in a long time. I mean, this last draft class wasn't incredibly top heavy and strong, and not just like the top 20 picks. We're talking like the top 100 guys. Like it was loaded with really good talent. There's guys who are in the top 100 this year that would be a top 30 player this year without question. There's like a lot of good and I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a lot of good depth pieces in this upcoming draft. There's very few guys, in my opinion, who are going to be like top tier breakout stars as soon as they hit the league, like we saw with Jaden Daniels, like we saw with Bucky Irving. Mikey Sainer still in the second half of the season was awesome. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, like there were a bunch of really good rookies that played like veteran starters, honestly. So I think that's also part of the curve, right? Like we saw some rookies kind of get like playing more than they should have, getting their feet wet in the NFL, and that also attributed to the quality dip. So combining how offenses and defenses are ran, where defenses are shutting down everything deep because top tier QBs, that's where they're exploiting defenses. Mm-hmm. Now it's not like back in the day where they're picking apart defenses on the sidelines and over the middle. Everything's deep, deep, deep. They're taking that away, forcing checkdowns, forcing the short game, making you grind RPOs the entire game. You know, like that is part of it. Then the other side of it is you just have young guys, and especially coaches, like young coordinators, young head coaches who are learning how to play call in the NFL. I mean, like we look at Sean McVay back in 2018 when they went to the Super Bowl. His offense is completely different now than what it was 5 years ago, right? And that's what you're going to see a lot with these young coordinators. And once they get into these head coach roles and they become solidified OCs and DCs, the game 5 years from now is probably going to be flipped the other way. We're going to see those deep shots happen more. We're going to see the big breakout plays because they're going to want to take away the RPOs because that's all they're seeing right now. And it's not every team in the league, and it's not the entirety of how offenses are ran, but we're seeing a much larger chunk of shotgun play action, shotgun RPOs, West Coast style offenses. We're barely seeing anyone go under center outside of the Kyle Shanahan style coaching trees, right? Like no one's going under center anymore, which I think is bad, but defenses will adjust. And then eventually teams will start to go back under center because it's what's going to exploit these new defenses. And that's what's going to get football back to where it was back in like 2018-19 when everyone was just lighting up the scoreboards and box scores. So that's a long-winded answer, but short term, it's how offenses and defenses are ran currently with the short game and the abundance of rookies. Those two together made for a very what felt like stagnant and stale first 6 weeks. Once we got to week 7, it felt like the league blew open and we saw the same type of volume that we used to see, right? One last point, the short in preseason. That's another huge factor. They're not getting the reps. They're not getting the time to gel together. And I think the potential of shortening the preseason even more and even eliminating it altogether, like Roger has said, that's going to lead to that happening at an even higher level. Yeah,
I was reading about that. So obviously this, there's a lot of, outside of like what we said, right? Outside of asking, Travis Kelce what his favorite cereal is, there is a lot of, kind of serious press conferences from people like the president of the NFLPA, and I felt like I was catching up on the NFLPA's session at Media Week this week, and it felt like they were very adamant about pushing back against a lot of the seasonal structural changes that Roger Goodell and the NFL on the league side are trying to implement. And like you said, a shortened preseason, possibly even dumping it completely, and then that continued push to add that 18th game. So for you, I mean, like you said, are you pretty confident that an elimination of the preseason in favor of that 18th game is just gonna continually cause like the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season to kind of have this really sluggish start?
I think so. And something that I also want to add to that is back in, I think it was like before 2015, it might have been even earlier. You used to have, once like players were drafted, everyone was at the facility and that was it. Like from the beginning of May on, you were there from the time until the season ended. Now you have mini camp, you have OTAs, and that period between OTAs and training camp is like 3 to 5 weeks, depending on if you have a new head coach or not. The players get that off now. So that's 3 to 5 weeks they're losing of that team bonding and that extra preparation. So I think the culmination of both shortening preseason and that whole month block is gone. That's causing this, right? So I'm wondering if they do get rid of the preseason, if they're going to say, hey, okay, we'll push back OTAs, but then once you're here for OTAs, let's say mid-July, it'll run mid-July to mid-August, and then you'll do training camp with no preseason games. Now they're all together consistently for 2 months straight, and that might help it and help mitigate that lack of quality a little bit. I'm just not sure if that's at the forefront of the NFL front office's mind. And I think if they do the 18-week game schedule, you have to do 2 bye weeks. I think we've all seen the clip of Joe Burrow talking about it. There's multiple players that would, like, if they were going to do 18 games, a 2-week bye week would work great. You could mix that in with rotating Thursday night football, so you're no longer getting a 4-day rest before you play Thursday night. It'll work out where you'll have your bye week, and then when you come back, you play Thursday night, and then you get another mini bye after that. Like, there's a lot of ways they can work it to make this work.
Yeah.
Do I think Roger Goodell and the NFL rest of the front office has that foresight to make that happen? We'll see. There's been some decisions that have been hit or miss, over the past few years. But I'm sure we'll get into that as we go throughout this pod. But
yeah,
again, we'll probably see a dip of quality at first. I think once it's established, then it's the norm, and teams figure out a better schedule and a better way to install, then we're going to see that go up for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there have been seasons, obviously, plenty of years in many sports where, everyone's excited about a specific rookie class. And I feel like people were excited about this rookie class. But I feel like this is a unique season in that, like you said, along with a lot of the coaching changes and stuff, it combined I've never really seen a season in which not only is this rookie class exciting, but they've had such a direct impact on overall how the whole league is going to go. Obviously, I feel like the big example, Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. But you look at right now, you're looking at, just the draft board from 2024, and there were 6 players taken in the first round that made the Pro Bowl. It just feels like a lot. Notably, one of those players that did not make the Pro Bowl in the first round, Caleb Williams. A bit of a slow start for the Bears this season. It felt like they never really got going. But, it's just one of those things where, there are always guys that are going to pop out as the season goes. Jaden Daniels, it's kind of hard to say that he's a guy that emerged. He was taken 2nd overall. He was the reigning Heisman winner. But I think for him to take Washington as far as he did, that is kind of the surprise there. So Jim, kind of your thoughts on this rookie class and what do you feel like what's next for a team like Washington? How do you compound on a season where they far surpassed expectations?
Yeah, I think, going into the season, I don't think I'm alone in saying that I thought Washington had probably a bottom half of the league roster, unless you're some sort of football Nostradamus. But I think what they did well is when they drafted, they not only, they drafted great players, but they spread out the wealth in which they drafted. They drafted a different position in every single pick. Right. So that the GM Adam Peters went in there knowing, like, listen, we're depleted pretty much everywhere. We have holes to cover essentially everywhere. And what we have to do is cover all those holes as fast as possible with the best players we think. And they did it. Jaden Daniels, I don't know if I expected this kind of season, but I've always been a Jaden Daniels believer. I don't know. What they did was kind of unprecedented. Probably not something that's been done since, the Redskins back in 2011, 2012 with RG3.
Yeah.
He kind of came right in there, plugged right in and led them to the playoffs. I think you could also look at it now as sort of a shift that with a first-year head coach and a sort of retooling a roster, teams are going to be given less of a grace period when it comes to still sucking with a new roster and a new head coach. I think, Dan Quinn came in there, immediate 12-5, immediate culture shift, immediate change. D'Amico Ryans came in, immediate playoff contender. Kevin O'Connell came in. I think that was the year they went 14-3 and lost to the Giants in the first year, in the first round of the playoffs. I think this grace period of, he needs a couple of years to really get his guys in and really sort of establish that. I think that's kind of gone. I think teams are going to want these guys that come in now and make that change immediately. So that's could mean coaches are even on a shorter leash than what we've been seeing sort of that shift to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny that you bring up RG3 because not necessarily that draft class, because I mean, I think it was kind of spread out among like 2 or 3 different draft classes. But looking back to kind of a next generation of quarterbacks that I feel like we haven't seen change the league like this in a while, I would point back to that kind of era, the RG3, Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson,
Yeah.
like era.
I mean, those were 3 teams that all drafted quarterback. I mean, Russell Wilson was in the 3rd round, and
Yeah,
I think it was between him and was it Matt Flynn?
yeah,
They were going
Yeah.
back and forth between who's going to be the starter. But I mean, those 3 teams, they drafted a quarterback and all went to the playoffs. And Russell Wilson won a game. I think it's over RG3. But yeah, and this draft class with the quarterbacks that were taken, I mean, I was a Bo Nix hater. I'll come out and say it. I had no faith in Bo Nix. I thought he just probably interviewed well with Sean Payton, and Sean Payton kind of fell in love with the guy. But he kind of found a way to control that erraticness that we saw in college and just turn it almost into Josh Allen-y, where you kind of have no idea. You can't really predict what he's going to do, but when he does it, holy shit, it's amazing. He's going to complete some 60, 70-yard bomb down the field, and it's incredible. The jury's still out a little bit on Michael Penix. I think he was okay at the end of the season. JJ McCarthy, we still don't know, but everybody kind of it's crazy the impact this class of quarterbacks had, and I think that's what we all thought the 2018 quarterback class was going to have in the first year. And we saw now that it took a while for like Darnold and Baker to really sort of develop. It even took Josh Allen a few years, but this really was kind of the year of the quarterback that we thought we had in 2018.
Yeah, and it took Darnold and Baker like a couple team switches too to get going.
Yeah,
which no knock on them. I mean, I just feel like a lot of those teams just did not develop them correctly. Which I do want to get into one of those teams that did not develop a quarterback correctly, the New York Jets. Jim, this is year 2 of the Aaron Rodgers era.
Yep.
Last, I think 2023, I think the fan base was ready to kind of give the Jets and Rodgers, kind of the mea culpa. Like, he got hurt first game, first possession. There really was, there was really no way to kind of salvage that. But then going into this season, expectations were still high, and they did not meet them. It felt like the Jets, they were just not playing inspired football. They ended up firing Coach Saleh after a 2-3 start, and then kind of just limped their way to the end of the year. Before we get into some things that we like that they started their offseason with, how would you evaluate this Jet season?
I think this was just a team without an identity. The Jets for the past however many years have been that identity where we're going to beat you on defense. We're going to have a tough front seven, and we're going to get to the quarterback. I think with the offseason moves, because of salary cap and budgetary reasons, getting rid of JFM, not retaining Bryce Huff, we took a hit there. And when we didn't have that identity, that was the cornerstone. It all just the house kind of fell in on itself. I think Robert Saleh needed a little more than 5 weeks to figure it out. Not to say that I don't think he should have been fired. I think he should have been fired. I think he had his opportunities and sort of squandered it. But I think 5 weeks was a little premature, because once we realized that defense wasn't there, once that front seven wasn't who it was, and DJ Reed kind of took a step back, Sauce Gardner had a down year, there wasn't any direction for this team to go. And I think they needed more time to figure that out with people in-house rather than just blowing it up 5-6 weeks into the season. So I think that's kind of where that real tough middle of the season lull stretch really came from, is we lost our identity, fired everybody. Nobody came in with a fresh idea of who this team was going to be. So it was just kind of guys out there playing football, not necessarily a team with a goal and motives, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. But now, 2 weeks ago, they brought in Aaron Glenn, a former New York Jet, a kind of a fan favorite player. He was announced as the head coach on January 22nd, and I feel like there's a renewed energy around this team. So for going from having no identity in 2024 to bringing in this guy that kind of gets the fan base, excited again. What is the identity that you think Aaron Glenn is going to bring to the Jets?
I think he's going to hold true to that identity of the Jets. That it's a punchy in the mouth kind of team. It's a defense first. We're gonna get to the quarterback. We're gonna get you off the field as fast as possible. And outside of that, I think the best part of Aaron Glenn being hired as head coach is he has pride for being a New York Jet, for being the head coach of the New York Jets. He was drafted here. He played. I forget the amount of seasons, but I mean, he was a fan favorite here. The fan base loved him. He wants to be a Jet. He wants to see the Jets succeed. And I think having this guy with the history of being on the team and seeing successful teams in the past come in here and bring that sort of, punch you first culture that not only he learned as a Jet, but also from this Lions team that he was a coach for the past 3 or 4 years. He's bringing in a identity of, punch first, sort of what, Jets teams in the past have used as their motivation and their identity.
Yeah. He played on the Jets from 1994 to 2001 to answer your question there. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I mean, they're going to be a defense first team, but obviously, the biggest star on this team right now is Aaron Rodgers. I feel like every year, every offseason now, it's like, is he going to retire? What's he going to do? Is he going to just go on every single podcast? Like, what's his focus here? And obviously, it felt like with Saleh, once Rodgers came in, that's when the clock started ticking for Saleh. It was like they brought him in and they were like, you have to figure out how to succeed with this guy, or we're gonna let you go. We're gonna move on, right? Because we are more focused on succeeding with this guy than we are, kind of succeeding with you. Naturally, I mean, he's a massive signing that they got. Well, they got him in a trade, but you know what I mean? A massive acquisition. So now with Coach Glenn, I don't know if it really feels like that. It's like, okay, see what you can do, but should Aaron kind of call it a career, we kind of want to have you stick around and continue to build your vision at this team. Do you kind of feel the same? Like, it doesn't really feel like there's like that pressure with that relationship with Rodgers.
Yeah, it felt like bringing in Rodgers for Robert Saleh was almost like an ultimatum, where if you don't succeed with this guy, get the hell out of here. You've had your chances. You couldn't develop a number 2 overall pick, whether that be Zach Wilson has the potential to be that guy or not. Whatever, that's in the past. But it felt like if the ship went down with Aaron Rodgers, then it was going to go down with Robert Saleh as well. I would say, this situation does feel a little different with Aaron Glenn. I think what's really going to come into play here is who can the Jets bring in if it's not Aaron Rodgers. I look at the number 7 overall pick, and I at that point you think Cam Ward and Shedeur are gone. I don't want to reach on a guy like a Jackson Dart or a Jalen Milroe. So are you almost kind of stuck with him for this last year, unless if he decides he wants to stay and doesn't want to retire? Are you kind of stuck with him and sort of just, I don't know, see what he can do? 2 years post Achilles injury. I hear the second year after the injury, the Achilles is supposed to be much, much better. But it's a difficult situation that I'm glad that I don't have to navigate, and I trust Aaron Glenn to be the one to navigate it.
Yeah. Well, I guess the other question is, I mean, who do you I don't think the Jets take a quarterback.
Yeah.
7th overall pick.
Yeah.
Like, if a generational talent falls there, like take the best guy off the board. But I just, like you said, I don't see it happening. I mean, the one option that they have is, developing Jordan Travis. I mean, I know he's had his injury problems. Like, he's not really, obviously he's not really had a lot of experience. He hasn't had to, been able to get a ton of snaps. He spent a lot of time on the reserve list. Do you see them kind of trying to develop him a little bit more as the season goes on?
I think, honestly, I don't. I see Jordan Travis as sort of a project from the last regime. I don't think this is not that Aaron Glenn has any sort of ill will to the guy. It's just this isn't his guy. He didn't bring him in. I think he stays. I think he is the third string. I think he gets some preseason time if the preseason still exists. But I don't. Yeah, I don't see Jordan Travis sort of taking that step, at least with the New York Jets. Yeah, it's tough because I love Jordan Travis at FSU. It was heartbreaking watching him get hurt, and then the whole drama with them getting snubbed out of the playoff. But I think that was sort of a project from a different time, and now we're on to different things. So I think it's if gun to my head, I think it's Aaron Rodgers for another year, and then a similar late round, like a round 3 to round 5 draft pick of a quarterback who has signs or who they think they can develop, and maybe next year is the year we go after the QB in the first round. But
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great outlook. Mm-hmm. So we've got plenty of time to talk about other things the Jets can do leading up to the draft, after this week. But now I want to shift gears to our final segment, which is just full coverage of Super Bowl 59.
Mm-hmm.
As everyone knows, this is a repeat of Super Bowl 57 between the Eagles and the Chiefs, this time being played in New Orleans. The Eagles, they fought their way through 3 rounds. They came all the way out of the wild card round. They got lucky with Washington taking down Detroit to maintain home field advantage all the way through the NFC portion of the bracket. Kind of punched Green Bay in the mouth, got out against LA in a close one, and then dominated against Washington. And then their opponents, the Chiefs, the new evil empire, they secured the 1 seed yet again, took down Houston in the divisional round, took down Buffalo in a very close game, a very controversial game, and now they meet once again in the Super Bowl. Guys, I just wanted to say, ask Jordan, overall, your thoughts on the postseason, anything that really surprised you, or did you kind of feel like this matchup was coming all along?
I think the Chiefs were definitely going to make it. I think if any team was going to challenge them, it would have been the Ravens if they got past the Bills. Like they just match up so well. We saw week 1 literally came down to an inch, difference to settle who won that game early in the season. So no surprise that the Chiefs made it to the Super Bowl, even outside of some of the controversy and everything that happened. And I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the biggest surprise this playoff run and biggest surprise on the season, we've talked about them the whole podcast, the Commanders. I mean, this was the laughing stock of the NFL for the past 2 decades, essentially. They get rid of Dan Snyder. They bring in new ownership. Adam Peters comes in, completely reprograms this franchise. I had them when I was writing my season preview blogs. I had them as 31 on the power rankings. By the time preseason came around, I had them down to 32, and they worked all the way up to as high as number 3 at one point, right? So, the Commanders just in general were such a surprise this season, and taking on the Lions the way they did was awesome. And the Lions had a ton of injuries, but they've had a ton of injuries all year, and they went 15-2, right? They were one of the best teams in the NFL for the vast majority of the season, right? With all the guys they lost on defense, but something had to give. Commanders just had a perfect scheme to run. The Lions love to run man coverage, especially with 1 high safety. And if there's anything Cliff's offense is really good against, it's 1 high safeties, being able to take their RPOs, get Terry McLaurin out in space and let him work against their depleted secondary. That's what really drove that, and it's just a shame that they went against the Eagles, who are very fundamentally sound on defense, and they have the exact perfect roster to run the Fangio style scheme. Because for people that don't know the Fangio style scheme, it's something called cover 4 match is basically what it's based out of. And what that normally cover 4 means, you have 4 defenders over the top, 3 underneath. And it's normally 1 defender underneath in the middle and 2 in the flats or hook area. How cover 4 match works is it's kind of zone coverage until it's not, where if someone passes your zone, depending on the rules, you take that route. So one play, it might look like man coverage, and the next play, it looks like traditional cover 4. And then they mix it in with cover 6, cover 8, which gets a little more complicated. I won't go into that now. But the Eagles defense, I think, is really going to be the end-all be-all of this Super Bowl matchup, right? Because they were able to shut down. I mean, they got a huge lead. They were able to let up a couple scores in the second half. But this defense, I think, matches up perfectly with what the Chiefs want to try and do. They want to try to dink and dunk off into space, get Mahomes out of the pocket, let him work some magic, which we haven't really seen from him much this year, but we've seen it the past 2 playoff games. Like, he's been able to create in space and make plays happen the way we normally see, right? How this defense is set up, they're not going to let him get outside the pocket nearly as much. Nolan Smith has been unbelievable through the past 8 weeks, including regular season and playoffs. Jalen Carter is a menace. I'm completely shocked with how dominant of a player he's become. I knew I had him 9 on my board when he came out as a rookie. I knew he was going to be good. I didn't think he'd be this good this quick. He's very good on the interior. Milton Williams, very underrated D tackle. And Zach Bond is really what brings this whole defense together. He was my pick for Defensive Player of the Year. He's definitely not going to win it. But if I had a vote, he would be my pick. And he's kind of like the perfect linebacker for the type of defense they want to run. And I think he'll be kind of he's the piece that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. They're talking about Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay, CJ Gardner-Johnson. Obviously, the front four is very good. Brandon Graham is probably going to play 10 to 15 snaps. I don't think he'll be 100%, right? Mm-hmm. But Zach Bond ties all this together. And I think he's going to be challenged with covering Kelsey a lot. And not necessarily man coverage, but with those cover 4 rules, if Kelsey comes into his zone, he's hooking onto him and he's going. And I think if they can shut him down and use their safeties and corners to bracket Xavier Worthy, who's been awesome in this playoff run, especially against man coverage, I think that's what's going to put this Eagles team over the top, at least from the defensive side. Offense, we'll see a little bit, right? But, like I said, the biggest surprise, I think, has been the evolution of this Eagles defense throughout the year and what we saw them do to the Commanders, who also were one of the biggest surprises throughout the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that Travis Kelce matchup, how much work do you how much of the Chiefs' current game plan do you feel like is going to dictate, how much, kind of work the Eagles defense kind of has cut out for them? Like, do you feel like Travis Kelce has been a significant part of this Chiefs offense? Like, obviously, yes, but I'm talking about, in comparison to the past 2 Super Bowl runs, it feels like, there's always kind of this looming now, is Travis Kelce, kind of on his way out? Is he, if they win, are they gonna, is he gonna call it quits and kind of ride off with Taylor Swift into the sunset, right? Like, do you feel how significant, of a target do you feel like he's going to be for Mahomes in this game?
Here's the thing, it's Travis Kelce, right? Like, we've seen this with veteran tight ends in the Super Bowl before. Like, we saw it with Gronk in his final season with the Patriots right before he retired initially, right? We've seen it with we saw it with Jeremy Shockey in those Giants runs. Like as he was in the tail end of his career, he wasn't a focal point, but in those Super Bowls was a go-to target, right? So I think they're going to want to get Kelce the ball early, and they're going to use him in a lot of different alignments just to see how the Eagles are going to defend against it, right? Like, we might see Kelce line up out wide on the first play, which we haven't seen from him a lot this year. Like, normally he's split out, he's a slot. I think they're going to isolate him on the first play just to see what the matchup is going to be, how they play that. And not that they'll target him on the first play, but I think that first drive, they're going to try to get the ball to him at least 2 or 3 times if they get the drive going, which I believe they will. I don't think this Chiefs offense will stall out and punt on the first drive. It'll probably end in a field goal. Just they're going to try to work some things out. But I think Kelce will be a focal point. I think the key for this game is how much they can get Xavier Worthy involved, because over the past few weeks, I said this earlier, he's dominated man coverage, and he's played a lot of man coverage heavy teams the past few weeks. The Bills, who again depleted secondary, they just fed Xavier Worthy the ball. Week before, they're playing the Texans, who have a good secondary, but they just trusted Worthy's speed to get over the top of the defense, right? So they let that happen. Mm-hmm. I don't know how well he's going to do against this cover 4 match style. because I think he thrives off of one-on-one matchups. I don't know how often he's going to have that, especially with the safety help. So I think this offense is going to have to go through Kelsey if they want to make anything happen. And it's really going to be that matchup of Zach Bond, CJ Gardner-Johnson. We'll probably see a little bit of Reed Blankenship. We might even see Cooper DeJean line up on him here and there. That's kind of where I'm at with it. If they don't get Kelsey the ball early, I don't think the offense is going to click the way it normally does.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I do want to get into the controversial calls. Obviously, the biggest one, that first down, or that lack of a first down, I should say, against the Bills in the AFC Championship game, I felt like was kind of the creme de la creme of a ton of things that people on the internet point to for, the NFL being rigged in favor of the Chiefs, the refs favoring the Chiefs with various calls. I mean, it's gotten as far as people, like last season, talking about an NFL script, right? I've seen a lot of comparisons to the evil empire of the 2010s Patriots, with people going as far to say that they hate this Chiefs team more than the rest of the NFL hated the Patriots during Tom Brady's peak. And look, as someone who came out of that period, right? Like, as probably one of the biggest Patriot haters around. I don't know if I can really say that's a fair comparison. So, Jim, I mean, as a fellow Jets fan, as someone who watched Deflategate, watched Tom Brady go, in front of a federal court to, defend a lot of the, potential accusations against, how the Patriots, got through a lot of those playoff games. Like, do you feel that comparison? I feel like people are kind of looking back on that era like a little too fondly. I think they forget, just how much people did not like those Patriots teams.
Yeah, I don't think it's really even a comparison. Maybe this is a little bit of bias, but I don't really hate the Chiefs dynasty. Not
Me
really
neither.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not until you've spent your entire childhood watching one guy just decimate your division in and out every single season, get the first round bye, win 2 games, make the playoffs, or make the Super Bowl. Until you kind of experience that, you don't that hatred isn't something that just the casual fan feels. And to compare the Chiefs, who, listen, you could say what you want about Patrick Mahomes, his wife, his dad, his brother. You could say what you want about the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce. Patrick Mahomes himself isn't like a hateable person. Like, Tom Brady would lie, cheat, and steal right to your face, and then kick the shit out of you. That's what creates hatred. It's not even close. I don't know. And if they keep beating the Bills, then I will keep rooting for them too. But to the people saying this is worse than the Patriots dynasty, then you're out of your goddamn mind. It's not. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean, look, I also have that extreme bias. When Super Bowl, what was it, 51? That was the Eagles. Sorry, not the Eagles. That was the Patriots Falcons one, right?
Yes, yeah.
So the 28-3 game, I remember watching that in a dorm at a dorm building kind of watch party, right? That moment where they threw the game-winning touchdown in overtime, I probably got from the dorm I was watching it in back to mine, which is on the other side of campus in 5 minutes. Like, the moment it got called, I was out. I was gone. Yeah. I went to bed. I didn't want to talk about it. But yeah, again, my biases, our biases are showing here. One thing I feel like that kind of maybe people feel like they don't want to see the Chiefs anymore, that I feel like is a noticeable difference from the Patriots. I could be wrong though. You could probably post something up that might refute this. Is we didn't see the Patriots so much outside of football like we do with Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Like even before the Taylor Swift stuff, heading into the 2023 season, you could really tell that the NFL was prepping, and the Chiefs specifically were prepping to make the Kelce's kind of like this big media face. And I'm not even saying that in like a conspiratorial way. It's just, their agents were booking them for a lot of stuff. Like there were a ton of commercials. Their podcast was blowing up. And then, you combine that with, Travis Kelce's new relationship, like they're going to be everywhere. And you didn't really see that. It goes as far as Andy Reid, right? Andy Reid's, recreating the Snickers chef's commercial. Like you would not see Bill Belichick in a Geico commercial in 2014. It just wouldn't have happened. So I understand that frustration, but also at the same time, I think the NFL, people talk about, they want this matchup for the ratings. They want, they want the Chiefs in it instead of the Bills because it's gonna draw more people. Maybe, but I think you also have to remember that the NFL is the most refined product like in the world, right? It is the most well-planned, well-prepped product in the world that no matter what matchup they have in the Super Bowl, it is going to be the most watched event in America every single year. Those different matchups are probably going to produce, a significant variance in overall ratings, but at the same time, like everyone is going to be watching the Super Bowl, whether or not you watch football, whether or not you like football, whether or not it's your team or not, like people are going to be watching. So I really don't think the argument of, they need this matchup for the ratings really holds up right now for the NFL. I don't know if you guys, agree or disagree on that, but
I don't think a repeat Super Bowl of 2 years ago is necessarily something you want for the ratings. Like that's if that was their game plan, then that's a bad game plan because I'm going to watch the Super Bowl. I'm going to consume every second of it, but it doesn't spark joy. The Eagles versus the Chiefs, already having seen it 2 years ago, with top and down, very similar rosters. This isn't a ratings poll, in my opinion. Neither was last year. Again, just another repeat. Like that's not the play.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll say so. I want to backtrack a little bit to the comment about like this Chiefs dynasty is not nearly as hateable as the Patriots, which I agree with the sentiment, right? But I do think there is a little bit like, before I say this, I want to preface, I agree with the NFL. I don't think there is collusion to like help the Chiefs. And I think it's people misinterpreting the NFL rule book. There's just controversy in general because they're the most televised team in the league. And you see a lot more of those officiating discrepancies and errors that are made, and it's made on the biggest stage and everyone's tweeting about it the next day, right? So like I think that kind of ties in and makes this a much bigger storm than it needs to be. I think Mahomes complains more than Brady ever did, at least this early in his career, right? Like we saw it last year with the Bills matchup. Like he went to Josh Allen right after the game. He's like, I couldn't believe the refs, man. Like we need to get calls, like yada yada yada. Like, and he backtracked the next day, right? He was like, look, like I heated the moment, like that's on us to win. I was just mad a couple calls didn't go our way in a winnable game, right? Like that's totally understandable. But then in the Texas game, he flops heading towards the sideline, gets a ticky-tack call on like a late hit and flips his arms up about it. We see Josh Allen do the same thing, right? So I think the quarterbacks nowadays know that if they act a certain way, they're going to get calls, especially when you're two of the top 3 QBs in the league, right? So, but I don't want to say Brady never did that. I don't think we saw Brady do it to this extent this early in his career. And number 2, we didn't have social media blowing up every time he looked for a call, right? Yeah. So I think how social media has played into it has made this a much bigger issue than it actually is, right? So to the point though, about this matchup, Eagles versus Chiefs again, I would love to see a three-peat personally. Like I love not even being a Pats fan. I loved watching the Patriots dominate. through the 2010s, early 2000s, right? Like, I know you guys did it. You're Jets fans. It's different. But like, just from a pure football perspective, right? And like, when I played football, I went out to win. I love the sport, obviously. But like, I always went out to win. When I coach, I go out to win the game. Like, I want the kids to win and know what that feels like, because there's nothing better than it. I love seeing teams dominate, like, year after year after year, the way the Chiefs are doing, very much like the Pats used to do, right? So I think the ratings they're still going to be, it's going to be the most watched Super Bowl as ever, because it's the trend. It happens every year. The next Super Bowl is always the most watched, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a trend of it's going. You know, the NFL didn't lean nearly as much into the Taylor Swift stuff this year. And I think that's going to kind of help them, because I think a lot of people at the end, like, we got the Taylor Swift, like, we got all of that, right? And I think that pulled in a bunch of fans that normally don't watch football. Now that they're pulled in, and they're starting to learn the game. Like, you hear these girls going on these podcasts and talking football in ways we've never heard before, right? They're more invested in the game than we've ever seen, right? And just non-football people in general are invested in a way we've never seen. And I'm not going to say it's all on Taylor Swift, but I think it's a mix of that, the NFL knowing how to market, the athletes being in every commercial and every major podcast. I mean, Pat McAfee, love him or hate him, he has completely taken over the podcasting and sports time air show industry within the past 2 to 3 years, right? So, and like, it's even on ESPN now, right? It's been on ESPN for a while, but like, you would never think that NFL player, let alone a punter, having his own show on ESPN would be a thing back in even 2015. You just wouldn't. Now it's how the NFL media machine runs, through social media, through podcasts, through clicks. And that's why it's good. Even though it's the same matchup from 2 years ago, it's still going to be more watched than last year's Super Bowl between the Chiefs and 49ers, right? Yeah. So like, it's just kind of the marketing machine that we're seeing with the NFL.
Yeah. And look, just wrapping this up, you know, I'm just not a conspiratorial guy. Like, I don't really look for those things that just might not be there, that you just can't find any evidence for. Like, I think we just need to take kind of an Occam's razor when it comes to these bad calls. It's like, hey, like, they're refs, they're gonna make bad calls. You know?
Yeah, if you don't like bad calls, you'd hate baseball. That's
you can say that for any sport. Like, you don't like bad calls, you're gonna hate basketball.
You'd hate
just gonna happen.
Yeah.
But and then just wrapping up the Taylor thing, it's like, you know, there's, like you said, I mean, there's really, we've kind of run the gambit on talking about, you know, her and her, you know, relationship with the NFL and the Chiefs. But I gotta say, like, I will always be thankful for kind of the Taylor effect. Like, the amount of people in my life that you know, not necessarily didn't like football, but like weren't paying as much closely attention to it, that I can talk to about football more, you know, as these seasons go by. Like, I think it's fun. I'm always having a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. One of my favorite tweets of all time came out around probably like a year and a half ago when Taylor Swift just started dating Travis Kelce. It was a screenshot, and the caption was, "Maybe we aren't so different after all." And it was a screenshot of you know, football guy and Taylor Swift Stan account. The football guy was like, "Oh, well, you know, looking at the all 22, you see how Travis Kelce's able to get open over the middle of the field because he does this, blah, blah, blah." And then the Taylor Swift fan screenshot was, looking at their star signs, you could see how Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are a perfect match, because she's a sun sign Virgo and he's a moon sign Aquarius or something. I was like, oh yeah, maybe just analytics in a different way.
Dude, they know their stuff, man. Like, you cannot doubt them. But we talked about, you know, the media hype around this. We've talked about what's going to happen when the Chiefs have the ball. Let's talk about what happens when the Eagles have the ball. So, you know, we're talking about MVP. Jordan, you put out a really great piece on, you know, the MVP race, which is actually getting settled tonight. You know, for those of you that are watching this live, just stick with us for a little bit. I know you want to turn on the NFL honors that just started. So we're probably not going to figure out, we're probably not going to get a live announcement on the MVP by the time this podcast wraps up. But the one guy outside of, you know, the usual QB race, this time it being between, you know, Lamar and Josh Allen, that next guy up, that, you know, the best non-QB MVP contender, Saquon Barkley. A fantastic season. for the Eagles. He's just completely balled out, been such a great part of this Eagles offense. How much do you feel like they are going to, be relying on him in his first Super Bowl?
I think the offense is going to run through him, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think the last Super Bowl, it was really Jalen Hurts when he was playing at his best, getting the ball out to people or getting the ball to his guys, spreading the ball out, right? And like, we had like 300 passing yards that game or something like that. Like, he put up some crazy numbers. Obviously, he had the fumble, which was tough, but like Jalen Hurts looked really good for
that was arguably the best game of his career.
Exactly. Yeah. Since then, like, it's not that he's a bad quarterback. Like, I won't say that. Like, he's obviously very dynamic. He misses a lot of opportunities, and I think this game is going to start and end with Saquon Barkley for the Eagles, right? Like, he has gone an unbelievable playoff tear. He had an unbelievable season that probably would have broken a record if he plays in Week 18, right? And again, an MVP style season we haven't seen from a running back, since Derrick Henry a few years ago, right? And before that, Adrian Peterson. These running back seasons are rare, and the key is just feeding that running back, right? And the difference between the Vikings in 2012 and the Titans, 2020, or was that 2021? Maybe 2019, one of those years, when he went for over 2,000 yards, the O-lines weren't that good. So they were just getting beaten and battered as the season went along. The Eagles have arguably the best offensive line in the league. They have the most yards before contact per carry, and Saquon's making the most of it even after contact. And even if he's not getting contacted, that's when he's going for 60, 70, 80 yards, right? So I think the key is running with Saquon, making that the focal point of your offense, and then letting the rest of the offense develop from that, right? Like, get the ball to A.J. Brown, because they haven't been targeting him lately, but they haven't needed to target him, right? Like, getting Devontae Smith the ball on those sideline passes, those toe drag passes that we like seeing from him, and the crossing routes in the red zone. Find Dallas Goedert one way or another, right? Like, so there's ways this offense will open up. If they put it in Jalen's hands and say, go win us this game, it is going to be an embarrassment for the Eagles. And I say that as nicely as I can, because I know I have some Eagles fans that are friends that are going to watch this. You need to put the ball in Saquon's hands. He needs to get at minimum 25 touches this game. Yes, it's a Super Bowl. Yes, you want to spread out the offense. Do what you've been doing for the past 7 weeks. Put it in his hands. Let him work. Let him dice up this Chiefs run defense, and let the offense naturally develop from there. It's kind of counterintuitive to how football is now, right? Like, you pass to set up the run in today's NFL. Go back to what it was 10 years ago, run to set up the pass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think really where the winner is going to come down here is what will fold first. Will it be the Eagles offensive line, or will it be the Chiefs defensive line? Because Saquon Barkley, I think, is averaging 147 yards per game this playoffs, a number like that, 147 or 157. The Chiefs has not allowed a 100-yard rusher in 18 straight playoff games, which is pretty incredible stat. And Steve Spagnuolo, since he took over, has this defense running like one of the best we've ever seen. Karlaftis and Chris Jones have just been playing out of their mind. It's really which of the big guys up front are gonna fall down first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of Steve, just a quick point. He should be a Hall of Famer. I know assistant coaches don't make the Hall of Fame. He should get in as a defensive coordinator, because what he's done with this defense is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've broken down both sides of the ball. Finally, starting off with you, Jordan. Quick thoughts and a final score prediction.
Like I said, it's all going to depend on this Eagles defense and how they decide to handle Travis Kelce. If they can shut down Travis Kelce and keep him at bay and just let the safeties and corners bracket Xavier Worthy and keep Mahomes in the pocket, all three are tall tasks. But if there's any defense that can do it, it's the Eagles. I think the Eagles defense will prevail and give them a chance to win. In order to actually win the game, give Saquon the ball as many times as you can, even if it's not working, even if he only gets 50, 60 yards. Keep giving him the ball, because it's going to force the Chiefs defense to play up. It's going to force them to play shallower, worry about the run, worry about the dump off passes. And that's when Jalen Hurts is going to take a shot to A.J. Brown. That's when something over the middle is going to hit on a play action play. Like that's what this game is going to be predicated on. And if you get into the red zone, I swear, if I see another team kick a field goal in the red zone in a playoff game, I'm gonna get mad because you're going against Chiefs. Score a touchdown. Go in, even if it's 4th and 7 from the 9. Go for a touchdown because you have nothing to lose. You're trying to take down a dynasty. You're trying to stop the three-peat. You have the horses to stop this offense. Just go for it. And that's what it's going to come down to.
Absolutely. And your thoughts on the final score?
Chiefs 24, Eagles 22.
All right. Close one.
It's still going to be the Chiefs. It's just the defensive line is crazy. I know I've talked about the Eagles a lot, but like the Chiefs will find a way to win. Kareem Hunt is going to go off for like 60-something yards because Pacheco is just not fully healthy yet. Mahomes is going to probably get 50 yards on the ground himself. They'll find Mecole Hardman will probably make some plays here or there. DeAndre Hopkins, he hasn't been involved. I don't know if he's going to be that much more involved than he has been, but just spread the ball. Justin Watson, I'm sure, will get a big play. Noah Gray will be involved in some capacity. And then this defense, just top to bottom, is unbelievable. I think Leo Chenal is going to play a lot more than he's been asked to. Normally, he's their like third linebacker in their 4-3. I think to stop the run, they're going to have to stay in that a lot. Not the 4-3 specifically, but maybe like a heavy 4-2 where he's like lined up more on the edge as like an overhang, right? Like just to stop those runs from happening. Let Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquill roam over the middle. Roam over the middle. Let Trent McDuffie line up on Devontae Smith wherever he goes and just trust the scheme to shut down this offense.
Gotcha. Jim, who you got?
Yeah, I'll give you my calculated NFL analyst answer, and then I'll give you my my personal like superstitious answer. My calculated NFL analyst, which is what you guys pay me for, is it's the Chiefs. Can't go against the Chiefs. There's one person I trust more in a late game situation if the game is close, if everything's on the line, it is Steve Spagnuolo. I think that if it's a one-score game and the Eagles are driving, he has the capability to dial up whatever is necessary to put the game to bed. So I take the Chiefs in that regard. I take the Chiefs again because if they can win 3 in a row, then so can the UConn Huskies.
Love that.
All right. And what's your final score prediction?
34-27.
Ooh. Like what do you think, Basel?
I'm gonna stick with the superstitious answer here. Not related to the Huskies because okay. I do not want the Huskies to win a 3rd title in a row. But if they do, whatever. Dan Hurley is inevitable. The Chiefs, you know, as much as I wanted to distance them from the 2010s Patriots, they do have that magic of you cannot trust any lead with time on the clock and the Chiefs on the field, right? The Chiefs offense on the field, right? So I think with that, I'm going to stick with the Chiefs. Just keep the ball out of their hands, dominate time of possession for the Eagles. I think that's going to be really huge for them. It's been huge for them this season. So I'm going to go Chiefs 28, Eagles 24.
Wow. Chiefs across the board.
Yeah, Chiefs across the board.
Yeah, can we get that Jinx graphic up?
Yeah. This is our first time doing this, so like this is going to set the precedent. Mm-hmm. So this is a very historic podcast that you're listening to or that you're watching. So that's going to wrap it up for the latest edition of the Basel Pod. We hope you all have a great time watching the Super Bowl. Hope you see a lot of fun commercials. Oh, one final thing. Can we just stop with the month-long campaigns for the Super Bowl ads?
Yeah, no more Super Bowl commercial trailers. I'm over that.
Yeah.
I don't care.
We're done with that. Like, I love the commercials. I have fun with them, but I like to have fun with them the day of.
And I get it's for the people who don't really care about the football aspect of it because the commercials are such a large part of it now where it makes sense to sort of advertise for it, but people came to watch the commercials without having done that in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for the agencies too. Like it's for like, you know, the ad, like the companies that make the ads and stuff. Cause it's like, they're putting a lot of time and money into it. I get it, but I feel
all for shareholder profit, baby. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like half the fun is the surprise, right? And I feel like we're losing that. We're losing that surprise. But anyway, hope you have a great time watching the game. Hope you eat a lot of good food. For Clubfoot Jim, Jordan Laube, I'm Sam Basel. Make sure you keep checking out house-enterprise.com for more great football coverage. And until then, we'll see you guys next time.